So this is the story about a boy who could. And it could be about anybody here in the room. We are all part of this world, and we all grow up with things that we're not so proud of, and transforming that is what the talk is about. So this is a story about a boy who's sitting in this chair. And, okay. This boy is sitting in this chair, and he's forced to sit in this chair, but he uses his imagination all the time. He thinks that he's possibly a pilot on the next flight to space, or he's Steven Spielberg directing E.T. And every time he goes into that imagination world, he picks up his head and he notices that he's sitting there, unfortunately. And he's thinking to himself, why am I there? It's not really my fault I'm there. So I spoke out the right answer again. And it happened 5 times today. So, but why should I sit there for that? And to the extent that this leads to his parents buying an answering machine for the reason of making sure that all calls that come from school are ignored. To the extent that, unfortunately, this happens. Parents get a call from his teacher, and the reason they give is, I want everybody to practice this with me. They use the word chutzpah. Can you guys say that? Chutzpah. Excellent. So he had that, and that's when you can't deal with authority, you talk back, and this was in 1st grade, unfortunately. So he grows up, and he becomes a teenager, and these things start to happen. He feels shame. Will he ever live up to his parents' expectations? He feels self-loathing. He doesn't understand why the world is treating him this way. And the most important thing he feels is anger. Why me? And these emotions start having an effect on him at 12, 13, 14. And one day he wakes up at 15 years old, and he decides, enough. This is too much. I have to create a new reality. I'm going to erase all the negative talk. Why can't you focus? Why aren't you like everybody else? And he's going to start anew. So let's fast forward 20 years. And this young man starts an internet company when it was a time when no one thought jewelry can sell. He becomes a chaplain in the Boy Scouts of America. He becomes a world-renowned speaker. He starts a program here in Montreal that teaches 8,000 kids a year called The Living Legacy. And most importantly, he marries this great woman and has 6 children. And life is great until one day he's traveling to Australia. Now, let me tell you, you don't want to sit next to me on a plane, okay? It's the worst experience, because even if you're flying for 45 minutes, I will know everything about you, and you will be forced to listen to my life. So imagine, right, we're sitting for 22 hours next to this poor woman to Australia. So after the flight, she's like, okay, listen. You stood up from your seat 87 times in this flight. You have 5 jobs. You can't focus on a conversation. I think you should get diagnosed. I said, with what? She says, ADD. So what do? I go down the block over here to the Montreal General, and I go for like a series of tests, and I receive this beautiful letter that changes my life. Based on the interview, Mr. Gniwisch does meet the criteria for adult ADHD. They added a couple of letters, which was nice. So my first reaction was, that I was angry. I was swearing a lot. I was like, that 1st grade teacher, if he would have only known in the 70s, no one knew about ADHD. And then my next reaction was, oh, now I have an excuse, okay? Every time I come late to a meeting, ADHD. If I'm in the middle of talking to my wife and in the middle of the conversation, I'm like, ADHD. But then I said, okay, I can't live my life like that. So, no excuses. How am I going to live my life? I'm going to live an empowered life. I'm going to find the silver lining inside this disease, as I thought it was, and I'm going to make my life better and hopefully share it with the rest of the people around the world that have this issue. So what do? I start doing research, and I find out that ADD or ADHD has an issue with the frontal lobe. Whereas most of the world, when they focus, the muscle grows. People with ADHD, the muscle shrinks, and therefore they can't focus. Imagine if you have somebody else who has remote control changing channels that you can't control. So you can't focus, you're impulsive, all those things. And that led to a lot of issues through life. And I remember growing up, I have this great rabbi who always would say this line. He would say that if God gave you a personality, don't ignore it. So it's there for a reason. And I noticed after all these years that I would do things sort of to help with my issues. So first of all, ADD people think visually. So I naturally color code everything, even though I'm colorblind with certain colors, so that's an issue. But in my office, everything is color coded. And another thing I noticed is that we procrastinate a lot. So now, you know, I need to always finish things, right? Right away. I mean, these things happen. And one thing I noticed when I went to the test they gave me at the Montreal General, that I wasn't really good with numbers. So I have an amazing accountant. I don't even deal with it. I'm just not good with it. And the greatest invention for me was the Kindle. You ask why? Because when I go to read a book, War and Peace, 896 pages, I never start, because I know I won't finish, and if I can't finish, I won't know the end of the story. Now with a Kindle, I don't know how big a book is. I start it. I pick it up. And then, you know, whenever I decide to read more, and it's a great thing. But I learned some very amazing examples about what is the silver lining of having this ADD. And number one I learned is that as the world looks at the people with ADD as impulsive, and by the way, that's me on the table. It wasn't my fault. I made a headstand on it, and they picked it up. I look at it that we are extremely risk takers. And for being an entrepreneur in 1999, to go online to sell jewelry, of all things, that took a lot of risk, but it paid off. Number two we learn is that, you know, the world says, okay, we're doing many things at once, but I look at it as that we're a natural multitasker, right? Whereas the whole world is multitasking, we do it naturally. We're changing channels quickly and unbelievable. And last but not least, you know, the world, when I was a child, if they wanted to be polite to my parents, they would say, he has a wandering imagination. Oh, so sweet. So I look at it as highly, highly, highly creative. And what, you know, it's interesting, I just celebrated my 18th anniversary. And guys, listen up. This is very important. Because whenever your beloved starts placing hints of the gifts they want, take note, okay? This is very important. So my wife is telling me that she wants a certain bag. And I'm taking notes, but then for years she's complaining that her diamond is not big enough for someone who works in the jewelry industry, right? She never thinks she's going to get the diamond. She thinks she's getting the bag. So it comes the anniversary, and I borrow someone's bag, right? This is the creativity, right? So I borrow the bag, and she's so excited I got the bag, and then I tell her, look inside. So she looks inside, and what does she find? The diamond. So this is where the creativity comes in. And interestingly enough, this boy who was sitting there imagining he was in the principal's office, today he's preparing to sit on another chair. In summer 2012, he is producing a play off Broadway called Rio. So go and see it. Thank you very much.